sit here, it would be even better. Testing application is a good thing because you can prevent bugs before the launch of your application, before the release to production, or before your well, that's the same thing, but before your users get the taste of what you built, if it would be front-end or back-end application. Me, as a back-end developer, I can say that testing is very important because you can see errors before they happen when you change something, when you're coding and writing some application that could be complex, and if you don't have tests, then you're always catching a mouse. And you know how mouses are really fast, right? They're quick, they move really fast from one way to another, from one corner to another, and that's how it would feel if I would try to catch bugs without tests, right? It would be really hard. And if you don't write tests, they're gonna end up in production, users are gonna complain, so nobody wants that, right? So let's keep it simple, and even though it requires some time to write those tests, but it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth the time. Another thing why we test applications is that we want our developers, you want them to understand and read while they read the code. So you have the function, let's say, that does a sum. You go x plus y equals that. If you have a test, well, that's a very simple example, right? And if you have a test, you would just see if the input provides the correct output, like 2 plus 2, and the output would be 4. So you would test that. Aside of that, if there would be a really, really complex application, an algorithm, you would probably separate parts of which ones you want to test, and you want to isolate the concerns. Why else do we test an application? I think honestly it's just for my own sanity, because I've written quite some code, well, during the time that I'm a developer, and honestly a lot of it was without some tests. And when I look back at it, to the history, like I look back to the history when I was writing the code without a test, a lot of it was in front end actually, and some of it was in back end. I used to mess it up. When I want to go back to something and change it, I change it, and then some other part breaks. And tests can actually prevent that from happening, and it will save you so much energy, and it will save you so much brain power to just tell you like, hey, you changed something changed here, and that's why the test broke. So you can actually immediately recognize the errors and immediately recognize what was the fault, what did you do, and how did this affect your whole other system, or like the application's dependencies that were dependent on that part where you changed it. I guess that's also a good example of sanity check, I guess. So yeah, that's why we write tests, and I actually start a lot more and more and more liking it. And during day and day development, I'm always trying to write tests and execute them well to cover most of the cases, edge cases, and so on. Even though you think, I might not need this test, but apparently, in sometimes you thank yourself in the past that you actually wrote that one. But yeah, without further ado, I wanted to also teach you how to mock things in jest. So that's gonna be next. Let's go. Well, I won't be able to do this, I guess, because the lens is expensive and I don't want to touch it with my hand like this, so